All right, so continuing from where we left off, we saw how to take in a basic texture and then do tiling and mirroring at warp level. Okay, now we're going to start looking at the other 2D patterns that are available within Mantra or within Houdini. So there are 2D patterns which require like UV maps and they're flat in general. And then you have like the 3D noise stuff, like you have unified noise and anti-aliased noise and turbulent noise, all of that stuff. So right now we'll just take a look at the 2D patterns that are available. Okay, so let's rename this. I'll just call this say texture and tiling. Okay. Now another thing that you can do with this, which should be relatively obvious, is that this is not just for texture purposes, because let's say if I come up here, I'm going to lower the polygon count and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to select my ramps and take this down to 2. And what I can do is I can just use this to scale something, right? Like if I take a sphere and let's say I do a copy to points and I can just plug this in. So I'll get that. Okay, but let me just lower the size. But then along with this, let's say if I take a wrangle and we'll call this p scale. So I can just say at p scale is equal to at cd.r, and there you go. So you can do this, or we can try like cd.g, But here's something interesting that's available in 18.5. I think this is new to 18.5. Is that you get like a fit range or a remapping function directly as a node. Okay, so if you type in remap, you'll get something called attribute remap. And you can plug that in over here, type in the name of your attribute. So we can take p scale. You can also transfer it to a new one, but we just want to modify p scale. And then let's say if I just want to adjust this a little bit, so I can do that. Or if I want to, like maybe make it a little more extreme like this. See, so I can do something like this as well. So you have options, that you can take care of. And then if I come into my tiling and texturing, and then if I start to adjust it, see, so you can do, or even if you try to offset it, you can move it around. There are other things we can do with it, but right now we'll just stick to this. So the thing is that you're not limited to just, looking at this as textures. You can do, any of the other SOP level operations on it as well. Okay, so now let's take another warp node and I'll call this 2D patterns. Okay, so let's just plug this in and I'll take this back to, let's do 512. So again, do the same thing. I'll take UV coordinates and we'll take a transform matrix. Okay, so let's plug in these two. And if you press tab, you'll find something called patterns. Okay, this is the stuff that we're going to take a look at. So there are there are a lot of them. Okay, so starting off with boxes, it creates like a tile pattern. Okay, so if I just take this, plug it into UV, and then I take the amount and plug it into color, and there you go, it'll create a box. And it's pretty straightforward, like you can adjust the box size. Okay, so you have like, this is controlling like how thick is the border or how big is the tile. Okay, and you can do frequency in here as like a repeat pattern in here, or you can do it from the X form as well. So if I just make it 4x4 over here, that's fine as well. Or if you just want to create, like if you want to do frequency over here, that's fine too. Like you have both options. So I'll just do it here. Okay. And then you get other things in here, like you can randomize it. So you can sort of, move things around. And you can also randomize the size, which is pretty cool. Okay. And then the nice thing is you can actually blur it. So if I take it, give it a blur of like 100, so you can blur it out. And then I can just take this same thing here And let's say if I want to color it, or let's say if I want to control scaling with this, see, so you can do this, except I'll just have to lower the size again. Sorry, lower the rows and columns. Yeah. And what I can do is I can probably put like a color in the middle, like at the end over here, and do ramp from attribute, set it to CD, and then I can just color this. So let's set it to, I don't know, let's try like a blue and, or let's do a light blue and a dark blue. Yeah, okay, this is fine. Like maybe we can do something fancy. Let's try this. Yeah, okay. See, so now you're actually like, modifying copies based on this. And I can probably like, we can take the attribute remap and let's make this like 3 or something. See. Okay, so this is as far as, like it's pretty straightforward. Nothing overly fancy. The blurring by default only goes up to 10, but you can take it up as high as you want. Like I can go up to 500, which won't make any sense, but you can take it as high as you want. Like that's not a problem. Okay, you also get a seed value, but we'll talk about it later. Like if you just connect the seed right now, you're just going to get this. It generates like a random seed value per tile, but it's just a 0 and 1 value. Okay, but we can do something with it at a later date, like not right now. Okay, so this is as far as boxes is concerned. So I'm going to keep this to a side and let's bring this back to 1 and 1. Yeah, so we have like one box. Okay, then we have brushed circles doesn't work, at SOP level. Like some of these things don't work at SOP level. Some of these are specifically for shader stuff. Okay, so we're not going to do brush circles, but we'll get cellular noise. So this is like a 2D version or a flat version of like Voronoi noise. Okay, so if I just plug this in over here and I connect the border, see, there you go, that's what you'll get. And again, you can define border width and we can define frequency and we can define border softness. So you can do this. And if we lower the jitter, they'll basically go back to being boxes. Okay, so this is pretty cool. And then you can do offset so they can move around. And you get different types of them. So you have like, this is basic, cells, and then we can come into distance 1, which will give you more, softer cells. And then you have distance 2, which will, which is sort of like the reverse of it. You get something called center, which gives you, like colored versions of it. And then you also have ID, okay, which is sort of like the seed value. Okay, so it's assigning like 0 and 1 values per cell. But again, you can do stuff with it. We'll talk about it later. Okay. Now, if you want to reverse this or, like reverse the order, then you can use a fit range. Okay, so a lot of the stuff that you're doing in Wrangle, like you can use a fit 01 and stuff like that. You can do it here using a node. Okay, so just type in fit and you can get fit range. There's also a fit range unclamped, but we won't use that right now. Okay, so you can just take a fit range, drop it in the middle, and then you can reverse it if you want. See, so you can do that. So anything, if you want to reverse it at a basic level, you can do these things. And you can also like, if you want to make it sharper or something, we can do stuff like this. See, so you can do this again, like here you'll get different, results. So if you just want to do dots or something like that, you can do those things as well. Okay, so this is as far as, cellular noise is concerned. Things will get a little more interesting once we come over to like the 3D noise maps, but these aren't bad either. Okay. Okay, then we have Crackle also doesn't work here. Okay, so those are the only two I think that don't work here. But then you get like the Mandelbrot set, which is just, you can do something fancy with it. So if I just plug this in, you're going to get that. Okay, like it creates the Mandelbrot pattern. Okay, and then you can define like the number of iterations in it. You can define the frequency, which is just like a repeat pattern, or actually it just tiles it. Okay. And you can also define like an offset value for it. So yeah, I mean, it's fine. You know, it's stuff that you can do with it. Let's see if we can build a better color. Okay, so let's come in here to the ramp and we'll try two-tone. Yeah, two-tone is nice. I like two-tone. Okay, now moving on, we get oscillations, which is okay. Let's just now, if you are not seeing like a vector here at all, like most of these require like a UV. Okay, now if you're not seeing anything like that, if you're just seeing like this, the colors are so similar, but this is like a UV, and then these are like vector 2, and then this is just a float. Now, if we look at it here, these are all float values. Okay, so what that means is that you can't connect a UV into this. You can just connect either U or either V. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to take a vector to float. And we'll take this and let's plug it into the radians over here and plug that into CD. Okay, and then we can increase the frequency. There you go. And then you can try to do an offset with this. Okay, now we can try something fancy. Okay, so let's try something. So basically what it's doing is it's generating like a band based on, you know, whatever is incoming. Okay, so if let's say I make this into 5, we should get 5 bands, and I should be able to offset it. Now, one of the nice ways to, and then we can try to blur it as well. So let's make it about 50. Okay, and we can try to lower the frequency to 1. Okay, but let's try something, right? So if you want to animate this, the simplest way is that you have a time function in here. Okay, and then if you want to control the speed of it, we can take a multiply, and you get something called as multiply constant, which is like there's an inbuilt value. So I can just take this time, and then I can take the scaled value and plug it into the offset. And if I press play, I should get this. And if I want it faster, I'll multiply this by say 4 and it will be faster. Now this itself is kind of boring because there isn't really a lot happening, but because it can take in any kind of black and white value, these things are also generating black and white value. So what that means is like this guy over here, right, which is making this for me. Let's take this back to 1 and 1. Yeah. Okay, so we have this, which is, you know, if I come back here, you're just getting like this black and white value. So what that means is that if I take this and I plug it into my radians over here, I'll start getting this. And what that means is that if I come back to my copy to points, I'll start to see something a little more fancy. And let's say if I make the, you know, repeat pattern to be, okay, I think 7 should be good. Okay, there you go. See, so you get something a little more interesting. And the same way, if I take the border softness over here as well to like 50, there you go. See, so you'll get some really interesting animation happening. Okay. And then we can replace it with whatever, right? So I can take, instead of this, I can take like distance 1, which should give me these nice little rings happening. Hey, this is cool, right? And we can try distance 2 and see what that gets us. See. So yeah, so you can do fancy stuff with this then. And you have different types. You have like sinusoidal and you have cosinusoidal. So I'm guessing it's sine and cos. Okay. And frequency in the negative pushes it outwards and frequency in the positive pushes it inwards. And again, like if we plug this in through the fit range, I think we'll get a different result. So you can sort of modify it and build more interesting stuff with it. Okay, so that's it. That is oscillations. Okay. Okay, I'm going to disconnect this and I'll keep it to the side. Okay, now let's come up to rainbow. Rainbow again works completely on like any incoming value. So we'll have to see this at the 2D level itself, like at this swap level, not on the copies. Because what it does is it takes any sort of incoming black and white value and just gives you a rainbow, based on that. It's pretty straightforward. Okay, but okay, just to go back to the oscillation, it will be fun to see what it does with the Mandelbrot. Yeah, there you go. See, so if we plug that in here, that should give me something fancy. See. So yeah, if you have more points and more data, it will give you a much more, interesting result overall. See, there you go. That's pretty fancy. Okay, going back because this is stuff that you can sort of play with, right? So anyway, so you get rainbow, which just gives you a rainbow. Okay, like any input value, it will just give you a rainbow. You can control saturation and you can control value. Okay, and you can also, like, if we take this, no, this is already giving you. So if I take this and plug it in, now this will be animated. See, so now you have like an animated rainbow. But yeah, you can do stuff with it. Okay, let's move on and we'll make another one. So let's call this 2D pattern A, and I'll create another attribute warp because I think, it's be like too many things in one warp. So let's call this 2D pattern B. Okay. So again, we'll take UV coordinates. You can also copy paste from there. So I can just take this, let's do Control C and Control V. Okay. Okay, so ramps we saw the last time ramps we saw the last time, it just generates a gradient. Okay, and you can also do like mirrored gradient. So this again requires a float value. So if we take a vector to float, and I can just take the amount and plug it in here, and there you go. Okay. And you can also offset this, so this can also be animated. Okay, so if we take any other pattern and plug it into this, or if I just take the time and plug it in here, you'll get that. But yeah, as I said, like, this is not limited to just plugging in UVs. You can take any black and white image and plug it in there, or you can take a color image and then extract any channel from it and plug it in there. Like, it'll give you a result. Like, so if I take, let's say if I take a texture and I have the mandrill, I'll just give it UVs, and then what I can do is I can just take in this vector to float, I can just plug that in. See, and if you press play now, so you'll get this. So this is with the red color, and then if you want, we can modify the green. So any of them, it will just take it and generate like a ramp with it. And here's something interesting that you can do with it. So let's say if I want to take it back to color, okay, so what I can do is I can actually take 3 of these. Okay, so let's call this ramp R, and I'll do Control C, Control V. This will take the green, so this is G, and this will take the blue. And then we want to combine these back together into RGB. So we'll take a float to vector, and I can just take red, green and blue and feed this back, and what we should get is, see, this. So yeah, so you can do, fancy things with it. Okay, let's make another one because this is a little more complicated than I'd expected, but fine. Let's take this and okay, let's rename that as well. So we'll call it 2D pattern C. Okay. Okay, so now we have rings, which basically makes rings. Like this is the simpler one. So if you plug this into a mount, you'll get a ring, and then you can define frequency, and we can define the ring size, and you can define the ring width, and you can randomize both of them. So we can randomize the size and you can randomize the width. Okay, so pretty nice. Okay, and then you can color it or do whatever you want. So if I just take this and plug it into P-scale, and you'll get that. Yeah, so you get something like this. Okay, so that's rings. Rings is simple. And then the nice thing is there's a blur option inbuilt on everything. So if I make it a blur of 50, you'll get, see, so now it's sort of nice. Let's get the ring width a little bit bigger. Let's make it 150. Okay, there you go. See. And then you can, like what we were doing previously, I can take in a ramp, or I can take in an oscillate, any of them. So I can take in an oscillation here and plug this into radians and take we're doing the same trick over and over again, but it gives you a nice result. So we can do this. See. Okay, then we have ripples. Ripples is simple. Okay, you can the thing to remember is you can also use this stuff for doing displacement. So you can get fancy results with that as well. Okay, so if I just plug this in and plug it into a mount, you'll basically get a ripple. We'll just take the time and plug it in, so you'll see what's happening. So if I plug the time into wave offset, press play, see, you get ripples. And again, we'll take a multiply constant. You can also make your own parameter if you want controls at SOP level, but right now I'm not too bothered about it. So let's make this like say 3 and press play. See, there you go. And controls wise, it's pretty simple. You have frequency, which is like your number of ripples, and you have decay. Okay, so which will just fade them out. Let's make it really high. See, there you go. And then you have offset, which can sort of move it. Yeah, so it's going to the side. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so that is as far as ripples is concerned. Okay, so I'm going to disconnect that as well. Okay, then you get rounded hexes, which is actually, it looks simple, but it can do a lot of stuff. So if I just plug it in and plug it into a mount, you'll basically get a hexagon, but it does a lot of fancy stuff. So let's make this like say 3 by 3. Yeah. And let's say a blur of 20, or let's try 60. Okay. And then you can define like the hexagon size, what you want, and then you can randomize the size, which is also fine. But this is where it becomes interesting. So you can define like if the hexness is 0, you just get a circle, and then as you increase it becomes more hexagonish, then it becomes a star, and it eventually becomes a flower. And then you can also lower the sharpness or increase it and make it more rounded if you want. See. And then the fun stuff is like if I plug this into let's say a ramp, and we'll do a mirrored ramp and increase the frequency. I'll just lower the tiling back to 1. See, so you can get more fancier designs with this. And increase the blur to give it like a little more, width. See, there you go. Okay, so at a blur of 500, it actually looks pretty nice. See. And so you can define, like, So pretty interesting stuff you can do with it. So yeah, so all of these 2D patterns that are available, you can do, whatever you want with it. Okay, like you want to do motion graphic stuff, you can do that. You want to use it for texturing, you can do that. Okay. Okay. Then we come to patterns and we have rounded stars, which is sort of the same thing. Let's just plug that in over here and I'll plug it directly into CD and there you go. So it makes a star and then you have the roundedness option, so again, and you have softness. So this is almost the same, okay, except that actually it is the same. Okay, what else is there? Soft dots creates dots or circles actually. So if I just take this and plug it in over there, yeah, so it just generates, a dot. So you can define the size of the dot and you can define frequency. So the parameters are the same. You can define randomness, which will sort of offset them. And you can also define random size. Yeah, so you can randomize the size as well. All right, now we come to, so stripes. Okay, so now we come to stripes. So stripes is actually very similar to ramp and oscillation. It generates a stripe. Okay, it takes an incoming gradient and creates like bands out of it. So if I take stripes and we'll just look at it at this level, and again this requires like a single value. Okay, so we're going to take a vector to float again and just plug it in. So ramps generates a gradient, stripes generates, like as you can see, it generates stripes. Okay, so if I just plug this in over here and you'll just get a stripe. Okay, and we can define the stripe width and you can define frequency. And again, you can define an offset for it. So again, so if I take something like this guy and see, so you'll have, stripes like that. And if we bring it in over here, we'll get to see something like this. See. Okay, now we'll make another one because these last two are interesting. Okay, so you have tiled boxes and tiled hexagons. Okay, so these are actually, they actually modify existing UVs for you to generate more stuff. Okay, so to show it very simply, we'll take another attribute warp and I'll call it 2D pattern. We'll call it bricks and hexes. Okay, because that's what it makes. Okay, so I can bring it in here and what we'll do is I'm going to make a box. Okay, so I'll just create a box and plug this in. So we just have like a single box like that and we can define the size of it. Okay, so what we have now is we just have a single box. Okay, now what I can do is I can come into patterns and I can take tiled boxes. Okay, and what this does is this isn't really a texture. It's actually a UV modification tool. Okay, so if you can see here, what it's doing is it's taking incoming UVs and it's generating a new set called box UVs. Okay, so I'm going to take this and plug it into UV. And if I plug this in over here, you're just going to see basic UVs. But here is where it becomes fun. If I come into the X form and I increase the tiling to say 4x4, you'll start seeing something here. See, you're seeing like a box pattern, generate, which isn't there like in the basic stuff. But when I plug it in through the box UVs, you can see like this staggering happening. And this is where it becomes interesting. So if I replace the basic UVs with the box style UVs, you get this. Okay, and then if I lower the size over here, you can essentially make bricks. Okay, and then we can define like the stagger amount, how much you want. You can also define like a randomness and you have like an offset value. So this is how you do bricks in Houdini. Okay, like if you want to make like a brick pattern, this is how you do it. And then let's say if you want to color this, we haven't talked about color as yet, but if I just take a color, so you'll get something called as a color mix. Okay, so you can take a color mix, the black and white amount goes into bias, and then we can just plug out the color. So this is like a mix. And then we can just like, let's keep this to white, and we'll keep this to like a red. Yeah, and there you go. Okay, now we will deal with more detailed stuff later, like if you want to randomize it and do other things with it, but this is basic. Okay, and the same thing applies to the other thing we're going to do, which is called tiled hexagons. Okay, which is exactly similar. So it takes in incoming UVs and generates something called hex UVs. So if I just take this, plug it into UV, I take hex UV and bring it out, and there you go. So I can take this and tile it a little bit more. Yeah, there you go. So if I make it, let's say 0.5. So you get like these nice little hexagons. Okay, and lastly, you have something called veins, which is, let me just plug in the position over here. So if it's not UV, then it will be called position. So you can just plug in position. Okay, and I can just take the amount and let's plug it into CD, and there you go. So it just generates like these veins. Okay. And yeah, let's plug that in here. So you get like, fancier stuff like this. And you can define like vein spacing if you want. Okay. You can define attenuation. You can define direction as well. So see, so you can sort of like, adjust direction. Okay. And then we have vein frequency, so how many do you want? And then you have noise amplitude and noise frequency. And then you have like even softness, which sort of makes it, like it removes the middle lines. Like this is much more harsher. And then the same thing if we take in like, let's say we take an oscillation and drop it in the middle and take a time and drop it in over there. See, you'll get this. So if I take vein spacing, or, let's say if we take the oscillation and make it about 4. Yeah, there you go. That's more fancy. Yeah, okay. Just modifying the color a little bit. Yeah, so this is as far as all the 2D patterns are concerned. But like my idea for the initial lesson was to make this. But I realized that in order to make this, we need to go through the basics, right? If you don't know what all patterns are available in Houdini and what you can do with it and how to tile it and stuff like that, then there's no point in me just directly jumping into, oh, let's make, like fancy tiles. So now that we have done all of this, the next lesson we will make, we'll make this. But I think along with this, you've also got an idea of, how these things can be animated and you can use them to do, more fancier stuff. Okay, beyond just, making textures. All right, so before we close this video, let's just see how you can animate bitmaps as well. Okay, because we've been doing a lot of this oscillation stuff. So just to give you an idea, you can apply the same oscillation stuff to a bitmap as well. So like this thing, we can animate this as well. Okay, so what I can do is I can just come in here and after this texture, let's say if I take a vector to float and I can extract one of the colors. So we have this, okay, and I can just plug this into, we can plug it into an oscillation. And let's try a frequency of 5. Okay, yeah. And we'll just do the same thing. So I'll just take a time and we'll drag it all the way out till here. And we should get this. Okay. And then if I plug this into my, into my setup over here, I should get that. See. And maybe we can just space these out a little bit. Yeah, okay. And if you, as I said, like if you wanted to go outwards, then I can just take the oscillation and then make it negative. Yeah, so there you go. So if I make it about -5, I think 5 was good. And let's try to blur it. Let's make it like 50. Yeah. Okay, so that's pretty much it. So as I said, like this is a completely different chapter than what I had initially thought, because my initial thought process was to make this as my first video. But what I realized was, like, if I just directly go into, okay, here's a 2D pattern, we're going to do some tiling and, you know, mix some textures with it. It doesn't make any sense if you don't know the basics, right? Like if you don't know what textures and what patterns are available in Houdini, and then, you know, how you can modify them or manipulate them and you want to tile them up. If you don't know any of those things, then the chapter itself is just like half-baked knowledge. So hopefully now that we've covered this, the next video we'll take a look at, you know, how to do a tile pattern like this. Okay, so that will be the next video.